Inside America's News headquarters, I'm Arthel Neville.
And hello, Arthel.
Hi, Eric.
Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn. Well, it was panicking and frightening. Hawaiian officials issued a correction on the false alarm about 10 minutes later, but they did that on Twitter. They apparently did not manage to send a second push notification saying that there was no real threat, that the first one was false, until about 38 minutes after the false alarm. That, of course, prolonging the emotion and the panic. Hawaiian officials say human error caused this false alarm. A worker during a shift change actually pushed the wrong button. The White House saying that this was a state-controlled exercise, meaning it wasn't run by the federal authorities. Hawaiian Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, she has confirmed on Twitter that a missile was not heading to Hawaii. And Honolulu's mayor also tweeting, quote, "The ballistic missile warning that was issued is a false alarm." Repeat, false alarm, but that did little to try and calm the shattered nerves. Brian Yen is following the story here in our New York bureau with the very latest. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Eric. A nightmare scenario, 38 minutes of agonizing, just tension on that island in Hawaii. This all started at 8:07 this morning, Hawaiian time. The alert came out, and as we saw with that message, it said ballistic missile threat inbound. That is on its way to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. This activated the emergency alert system in Hawaii. That is, people were watching TV at their homes at 8:07 this morning, and an alert went on their television letting them know that there was an inbound missile coming their way. This is what it was like to see that on your television.
The U.S. Pacific Command has detected a missile threat to Hawaii. A missile may impact on land or sea within minutes. This is not a drill.
I mean, incredible. The Hawaii Emergency Management Agency tweeted 13 minutes later, no missile threat to Hawaii. That's it. No missile threat to Hawaii after the alerts had come out at 8:07. But it took an additional 20 minutes for the Emergency Management Agency to reissue a push alert text saying that there is no missile threat or danger to the state of Hawaii. Repeat, false alarm. Now, Hawaii Emergency Management says someone pushed. Well, actually, the governor says that someone at the Hawaii Emergency Management pushed the wrong button, causing this entire nightmare scenario to kind of go off for 38 minutes. Someone at the Hawaii Emergency Management actually, they took responsibility. Listen.
This is my fault, and we'll work on so that this doesn't ever happen again. This is regrettable. It won't happen again because the criticality of the time on this type of event and the credibility of this alarm going out is critical for us saving lives.
Wow. This was the reaction from people on Hawaii on Twitter when this happened. Under mattresses, in the bathtub with my wife, baby, and in-laws, John Peterson tweeted, "Please, Lord, let this bomb threat not be real." Incredible. More tweets. Sydney Ember. People were sheltering in the basement. People were crying and holding each other. It was actually scary for a few minutes. And then there was also, there's not only scare, but there's also outrage. We had a couple senators and representatives of Hawaii go on Twitter. Senator Brian Schatz, again, false alarm, he tweeted. "What happened today is totally inexcusable. The whole state was terrified. There needs to be tough and quick accountability and a fixed process." And now, if you take a look at this full screen, this is directly from the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. This gives you an idea of what the plan is in the event of an actual ballistic missile attack from North Korea. From launch to impact, Hawaiians only have 20 minutes. That's 20 minutes to react. So the U.S. Pacific Command on Hawaii sends a message to the state, which then warns all of the citizens on Hawaii. Now, that only gives citizens 10 minutes to react. And that reaction, by the way, in terms of plan, it does not include fallout shelters. There are no fallout shelters. There are no designated blast or fallout shelters. There are no relocation plans. The plan is to either stay inside, and if you're driving, to jump out of your vehicle and to lie flat on the ground. So a real wake-up call, not only for people on Hawaii, but for everyone in the United States about this real threat, and also just scary about the amount of time that one has to react to such a threat. 38 minutes went by between that alert and the false alarm alert, and it only takes 20 minutes from launch to impact if a missile were to be launched from North Korea. So eye-opening for many people, for all of us.
That it is, Brian. I mean, shocking and just unbelievable, but also, as you say, opens questions about the reaction. We'll be talking to Dr. Manny Alvarez about that in a few moments. Brian, thank you.
Of course.
Arthel?
And Eric and Brian joining me now here on set is Gordon Chang. He's the foreign affairs journalist and author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. Gordon, so happy to have you here with me on set on this very disturbing and frightening day, because as you see, people, as you well know, people's nerves are on edge. As you have seen the day's events unfold, I want to know where your mind goes to first.
Well, I think that we were fortunate that this was not in Philadelphia, because in Philadelphia right now, there are 69,100 fans at Lincoln Financial Field watching the Eagles play the Falcons. So if you're at a big stadium like that and 40,000 or so cell phones go off with the alert, you can imagine the panic. So, you know, in a sense, we got a wake-up call, a sense that we now know what we have to do, not only in Hawaii, but in the other 49 states and the territories as well. We are not prepared for this. We just don't know what's coming.
Well, in terms of getting prepared, I mean, you just heard Brian Yennis's report saying that, sure, you know, listen, if this were real and not a test, Hawaiians would have had 15 to 20 minutes to take shelter. What shelter?
Yeah, there is no shelter. You know, and for the people in the rest of the United States, there is no shelter either. Because, you know, after the end of the Cold War, you can understand that we sort of went lax on civil defense. But right now, you know, within, let's say, a year, the North Koreans will be able to deliver a nuke to any place in the American homeland. They've already got the missile.
I want you to slow down and repeat that again. What did you just say?
Well, within a year, about the North Koreans will be able to land a nuke anywhere in the American homeland. They have the range. They've got the missile to hit anywhere. The only things they don't have is they don't have good guidance and they don't have heat shielding. But, you know, this is just a question of months, maybe a year, for them to be able to perfect that so that they will be able to threaten us. And we have missile defenses, but they're not really that good. So, you know, in a sense, you know, we're at the mercy of Kim Jong-un. Now, I don't think he'll launch against us for a lot of reasons, but nonetheless, that's only because we're deterring him, not because we can stop him.
So not only are we here in the States, people around the world, bad people, good people, you know, the good guys, the bad actors, they're watching the coverage. They're listening to analysis from people like yourself. You're an expert. So when you have someone like Kim Jong-un watching, what does he take away from this?
Well, he can see that we're not prepared, and he can see that with just a little bit of doing something, not even launching, he can create panic in the United States. So, for instance, let's say that they actually hack the emergency system.
Does this embolden him to, you know, does he feel like he now has leverage as we enter into possibly the talks that are going to happen?
Well, I'm sure he feels he has a leverage because, you know, he has a very effective cyber capabilities. So, for instance, he could hack into the Hawaii emergency management system, or he could hack into the New York system.
Not just him. We also, again, we have the bad actors. He's a bad actor, but we have the other people, the hackers, the would-be terrorists.
You have them, but you also have got the big nation states. You got Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. They all have advanced cyber capabilities. And we know in the history of warfare that the people who are on offense usually beat the people who are on defense. So, yeah, we do have cyber defenses, but we know the North Koreans are very good at it. They hacked Sony Pictures Entertainment in 2014. They exfiltrated hundreds of terabytes of data from that company.
So are we on defense, yes or no?
Oh, we're absolutely on defense.
With that said, Gordon, so as the world watches, again, friends and foe alike, what should President Trump do? Should he address the nation in a more formal setting in front of a camera, or should he tweet about it? And how important is his tone, as not only the citizens of the United States are looking to the leader to guide us through this, but also, again, foes and friends alike are watching as well?
The most important thing is that we have to instill a sense of deterrence in the North Koreans. You know, we have had discussions with the Soviets. We have discussions with the Chinese now. They're stable states. North Korea may be stable, but it could be unstable. There's a lot of disturbing signs out of Pyongyang. So the most important thing is for the United States to instill that sense of deterrence in Kim. We haven't been able to do that yet. Our militaries don't talk to his military. So that's a problem for us. And in some way, we have got to discuss this with the North Koreans. South Korean military is going to sit down with the North Koreans pretty soon. Yeah. I hope that they will instill that sense of deterrence.
Quickly, will this make China step up its efforts to deter North Korea?
I don't think so. I think that we have to impose a lot of costs on China before they actually come to the table.
Gordon Chang, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and get your take on all of these types of stories. Thank you very much. Eric?
Oh, thank you, Gordon Arthell. Well, imagine looking at your cell phone and it tells you a ballistic missile is heading your way. We have new reaction coming up from the Trump administration about this. You know, the White House called it a state exercise, raising the question this afternoon, should the feds, meaning the U.S. military, take over that state responsibility to warn us? A live report ahead.
And if you are just tuning into the news, you're hearing that the people in Hawaii are still recovering from the shock of a false alarm happening this morning, 8:07 local time, a cell phone warning of an incoming ballistic missile. They looked at their cell phone. It was all caps. That is what they read. It was a mistake, thankfully, but imagine the panic and confusion. The White House is monitoring all of this from Mar-a-Lago, and Phil Keating joins us now from West Palm Beach. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Arthel. Needless to say, the scare of a lifetime. President Trump was just wrapping up his morning golf game at the nearby Trump International Golf Club when this alert first went out via email and cell phones in Hawaii. A 20-minute false alarm until the correction came out, and people receiving the alerts on their cell phones didn't get it for a full 38 minutes. 38 minutes thinking that perhaps a nuclear-tipped warhead was on its way to Honolulu. By the time the president returned to Palm Beach at his Mar-a-Lago estate, his winter White House, a White House official shortly thereafter released this statement. The president has been briefed on the state of Hawaii's emergency management exercise. This was purely a state exercise. And a Pacific Command responsible for the Indo-Asia Pacific region. This statement from the commander, David Benham. U.S. PACOM has detected no ballistic missile threat to Hawaii. Earlier message was sent in error. The state of Hawaii will send out a correction message as soon as possible. Now, this was the original alert that first went out this morning, 8:07 a.m. Hawaii time. Quote, ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Again, it took 38 minutes for a cell phone correction to go out, saying it was all a false alarm. And Governor David Ige released this statement after it was all done and over. Quote, while I am thankful this morning's alert was a false alarm, the public must have confidence in our emergency alert system. I am working to get to the bottom of this so we can prevent an error of this type in the future. That error being blamed on a state worker who accidentally pressed the wrong button as he was leaving from his shift and a new person was coming in. The Federal Corrections Commission is also investigating. The FCC regulates all state as well as interstate traffic of communications, be it radio, TV, satellite, cable, in all 50 states as well as D.C. and the U.S. territories. And they will get to the bottom of exactly how this happened and if it's determined that this mistake false alarm was in fact intentional, there will be some incredibly heavy ramifications because, seriously, Arthel, of all things you could receive a false alarm about in this world, a nuclear-tipped warhead coming at you is about as bad as it could possibly get.
And that is correct. Okay, Phil Keating, thank you very much for that update there in Mar-a-Lago. Eric?
Thanks, Arthel. Well, for more on this, we're with Eddie Scarry, a journalist for the Washington Examiner. First of all, what Phil just said, it's a state worker. I mean, should state workers, with all due respect to them, should they actually have responsibility for something as serious as this? I mean, they run the DMV, for God's sake. You're asking someone who has these type of responsibilities to have such a major impact in world affairs.
Well, right. Well, happy weekend. And I think that this probably is a surprise to me, actually, that we're hearing that state workers have such a responsibility to alert of an incoming missile attack. So I think that's probably something they will take a look at. I think knowing President Trump, it's something, he's big on military, being responsible for things and giving them responsibility, delegating responsibility to military. I see that perhaps happening. And, just imagine if this was a federal issue, what we would be hearing about this if President Trump did have something to do with it.
Well, it seems like it's a kind of, a convoluted cockamamie system. I mean, when you consider the fact of if you know there's an incoming missile, it's going to be the military, it's going to be Pacific Command, it's going to be NORAD, which is now Northcom. But then they have to get the information to the state to then send out that, I mean, it seems to me that logic would say this is something that maybe should be run by the Pentagon.
Right. And in terms of systems, we hear about this button that President Trump has. It turns out it orders him a Diet Coke. In this case, in Hawaii, this button actually alerts that there's an incoming nuclear attack. I mean, I think that's a shock to a lot of people. Obviously, a shock in Hawaii. And I think your previous guest was saying that this kind of revealed the lack of preparation. There was a report in the New York Times saying that there was a wrestling match at a high school. When they got the alert, they grouped the students in the middle of the gym and were just trying to decide, how do we prepare for this? So I think for the state, that's going to be a whole other issue.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've gone through it during the Cold War, of course. We had nuclear bomb shelters. You still see the signs with the radioactive signs in some places in some of our major cities. Should the government, should we be better prepared for this? We have reports of panic, of people just, crying and breaking down, going into closets and not knowing what to do.
Right, and we would hope that the government is prepared for this kind of thing, assuming this really was a completely innocent mistake. I guess you would take that into account, but hopefully in the event that something like this were to seriously take place, there would be more of an advance notice, where there might be better, at least the local authorities would be more prepared to how to instruct people how to respond to something like this. So I hope that we learn more about that in the days to come.
To their credit, the state authorities, the governor and the head of the Emergency Management Agency in Hawaii, they are taking responsibility. Certainly they will have an investigation. What do you think should happen in terms of an investigation, what we could learn from that, any repercussions for those involved?
Well, it's a government employee, so I say they should be fired, but we know what that means. So maybe they'll make some kind of decision when it comes to the employee. I don't know that we need to know the name of this person. Yes. I mean, that could open up a whole other can of worms. But yeah, certainly we should be given some notice of how this investigation goes forward and what the outcome of it is.
And even a redundant system. I mean, it sounds amazing. It was a shift change and apparently did push the wrong button, say officials. You'd think you'd have you go on the computer and you want to change something, it says, are you sure you want to do this?
Right.
It gives you there's no break. I mean, there's no extra step there.
Right, or maybe the button is somewhere where, it's isolated from other buttons, something like that. At least there would be some kind of precaution to make sure something like that doesn't happen. But this is the first time we're seeing something like this. Hopefully we don't see it again.
Finally, President Trump was at Pacific Command on his way to China, so he was visiting with the officials there. What would you suggest to him in terms of what the federal government should do to better address this?
I don't want to advise the president, though I will say that about a minute ago, he was still tweeting about the Michael Wolff book. So maybe he wants to talk about Hawaii next.
All right, well, it's still many more hours in the day till we get to this. So, Eddie Scarry, thank you so much. Have a good trip back to Washington.
Thank you.
Arthel?
Well, as you can imagine, Eric, how terrifying this morning's false missile alarm was for the folks in Hawaii. And we have a Hawaii resident with us on the phone right now. His name is Dean Nomura, and he is a resident of Hawaii. And of course, Dean, I can only imagine how you felt this morning. If you could tell me, where were you when you saw the alert, and what was your reaction? Dean?
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Nomura. This is Arthel Neville at Fox News headquarters in New York. And I wanted to ask you, when you saw that text message that alert come across your cell phone this morning, where were you and what was your reaction?
Well, I was on my way to get coffee, and I sort of was in disbelief. I don't know. It seems kind of surreal.
And so did you just continue on your way to get coffee? Did you call someone? Did you text somebody else to say, did you see this? What's going on?
I went in to get coffee, and I was talking to other people, like, what's going on? Do you see this? And, yeah, people were actually leaving. They closed the store.
And how do you feel right now, Dean, considering that initial, what we now know as a false alarm, came in to your cell phone at 8:07 this morning, and it took almost 40 minutes later for officials to send out another alert saying, again, this is a false alarm, and that wasn't even in all caps. I mean, how do you feel about the way they handled it?
Well, I'm just in relief that it wasn't a real thing. I mean, it was a little scary, but I'm glad it's not a real missile threat,
Right. Did you, I know you live in Hawaii. Do you have friends off the island, here in the mainland? Anyone you called since then?
Sure. After I left, I got on the freeway and I called my parents, and I told them about it. And yeah, I told them maybe, this would be the last thing. That's it.
Where are your parents?
They're on vacation. They're in Vegas.
They're in Vegas. So what was their reaction when you told them what you said to them?
Well, they just said be safe. But I figure, like, if it's a bomb, it doesn't matter if you're inside or outside. You're dead.
What would you like to see happen now, Dean? I mean, as we know, this was due to a mistake, due to human error. And, as Eric and his guests, they were just talking about, there didn't seem to be some sort of a safeguard in preventing this person to make this human error. What would you like the state officials there to do next?
Well, you don't want these things to happen again, because people will take it as not just seriously. So, hopefully they just clean up their act.
All right, Dean Nomura, I'm glad you were safe, and you seem to be a cool cookie. I have a feeling that this will all kind of hit you maybe tomorrow or a few days from now. We do appreciate your time here. Thank you very much. And as we reported earlier, it took nearly 40 minutes for Hawaii officials to send out a correction to that ballistic missile false alarm this morning. So what was the holdup? We're going to get into that next. Stay with us.
We're continuing our full coverage this afternoon of the frightening alarm that really frayed nerves across Hawaii this Saturday. Then after that alert warned of an incoming ballistic missile heading toward the islands, but it turned out, as we had been reporting, to be a false alarm, thankfully. The hair-raising message was this: sent out to cell phones at 8 o'clock in the morning. Imagine waking up at 8 o'clock in the morning, taking a look at this on your phone, where it says, emergency alert, ballistic missile, threat inbound to Hawaii, seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Well, it took emergency officials nearly 40 minutes to send the correct message, correcting that. Now they say an employee at the emergency management office, well, he pushed the wrong button during a shift change to send that false alarm. The White House has been briefed on all this, is monitoring the developments. Hawaiian officials scheduled to hold a news conference half an hour from now at 6 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. in the afternoon there. Our Pentagon producer Lucas Tomlinson is live in Washington with more on reaction from the military and what's happening on their angle. Hi, Lucas.
Well, hey, Eric. As you mentioned, the 1.3 million residents in the islands of Hawaii woke up this morning to a startling alert, very similar to, I've been told, like an Amber Alert. You hear the alarm, you look at your phone, an inbound missile is coming. Now, what's really striking, though, is the timeline, and what many officials are saying is the slow response. The initial alert went out, as you mentioned, at 8:07, Eric, but then it took another 13 minutes for the Hawaii's Emergency Management Agency to tweet out, quote, no missile threat to Hawaii. But as you mentioned, it took nearly 40 minutes for that full alert to go out. In fact, the U.S. Pacific Command, which is in charge of all military forces in the Pacific and it monitors North Korean missile launches, did not detect any launch. They issued a statement at 8:35 local saying, quote, no detected ballistic missile threat to Hawaii. Earlier message was sent in error. State of Hawaii will send out a correction message as soon as possible. Well, guess what, Eric? It took another 10 minutes from that notice to at 8:45 local. Hawaii Emergency Management Agency finally sends out a correction nearly 40 minutes after the initial one went out. And not only did it startle the million residents of Hawaii, of course, you have tens of thousands of tourists to the island of Hawaii. You have a PGA golf tournament going on the island of Oahu. And interesting enough, Eric, just less than 2 months ago, the state of Hawaii brought back their sirens to have Cold War era tests that they haven't seen in the state of Hawaii in decades. And that's because, of course, of North Korea's ratcheting up ballistic missile tests. Last year, North Korea performed over 25 tests, including 3 tests of an intercontinental ballistic missile for the first time in North Korea's history. The last missile test in November went an astonishing 2,800 miles into space. That's 10 times higher than the orbit of the International Space Station. And if one day North Korea can prove its warheads can re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, it could be a threat to the United States. But already, missile experts say America is in range. But it's noteworthy, Eric, that North Korea has yet to demonstrate the ability to have one of its warheads or mock-up or test warheads re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. Last year, the head of the Pacific Command told Congress he's weighing a decision to bring interceptor missiles to Hawaii. Right now, if North Korea were to launch any kind of missile and it was deemed a threat to Hawaii or the United States, There are 2 locations where there are interceptor missiles. That's Fort Greely, Alaska, and Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. There was a successful missile test last year, but it's noteworthy there's only 44 interceptor missiles currently online right now to destroy a North Korean ballistic missile or any other country's ballistic missiles. But there is money, of course, in the budget. President Trump signed a $4 billion increase in missile defense spending just last month. There's a $700 billion $700 billion defense spending plan sitting on, the president's desk. But Congress needs to pass a defense bill when they get back to Washington next week.
And, Lucas, as you say, this false scare, it may speed that deployment of those anti-ballistic missile batteries up, so we'll see. Lucas Tomlinson this afternoon at the Pentagon. Lucas, thank you. Arthel.
And Eric, for more on this, let's bring in military expert Lieutenant Colonel Davis, Daniel Davis. Colonel Davis, I want to pick up on some of Lucas' reporting there. I want to find out your estimation, how serious is a ballistic missile threat from Kim Jong-un to the United States?
Well, right now, it's probably not as strong as what some may believe. He certainly has demonstrated his ability to fire that Hwasong 15, the one he fired last time in November. But as I believe he just said, that they've yet to prove that they can have the reentry vehicle survive coming back in. So it's not clear that they have that, nor that they have very many of them to do it. So there is it does exist. It's just not probably not as strong as some people might think.
And still, we are also talking now about the U.S. missile defense capabilities. Talk to us about that in terms of readiness and the amount of missile defense systems we have in place currently.
Yeah, I don't think that we have that many missile defense systems in place. I think that's the reason why the PACOM commander is talking about wanting to bring some more of that in there. But I think the larger thing, which is far more effective than any missile defense shield, is that we need to really emphasize our military deterrent to keep Kim Jong-un from ever firing the missiles. And we have quite a bit of opportunity and resources and capabilities to let him know for sure that he would be utterly destroyed if he ever did that. Now, there was a report in 38 North, which is probably the best civilian information on North Korea that's out there right now, this past Wednesday. And some of their senior officials went to North Korea and actually talked to some of them, and they scratched their heads. They said they really don't understand because they know for sure. They said it would be suicide for us to actually offensively use any of our weapons. They are solely for defense. And I think that logic shows that that's correct. So they can be deterred, and we should focus on that more than anything else.
Okay, and that's a good point you make there, Colonel. I want to point out, though, now a list of recent actions amid the growing fears of an attack by North Korea. I'm going to pop some things on the screen here. As of December 1st, last month, you had Hawaii reinstated its Cold War-era nuclear warning siren scheduled to be tested the first business day of every month. Guam distributed a pamphlet on nuclear attack preparedness that encouraged people to avoid using conditioner, quote, as it will bind the toxins to your hair, and a 16-page bulletin released by emergency management authorities in California warned people to beware of radioactive pets. Now, you just said, Colonel, that the threat, a ballistic missile threat from Kim Jong-un is not as serious or as imminent as we in the civilian world are thinking that it is. So what is it that either Defense Department officials, the president as well, what message should they send to the citizens of the United States? And also, what should the word be as they send it to other world leaders?
Yeah, well, let me just flatly tell you, there will be no war on the Korean Peninsula unless we initiate it, because North Korea has no incentive to do that. So I think that we need to understand right away that there's not some threat that North Korea is unhinged and any day they could throw out missiles, because it would again be suicidal. But because President Trump, H.R. McMaster, Senator Lindsey Graham have all been so active in talking about the military option, it does have people concerned. In addition to all the ones you just put up on your screen, you also had Australia, you had China on their province north of North Korea, Russia. You have a number of people that are having these kinds of nuclear preparedness. And as you may have seen, the CDC released something earlier this week that they're making some more active measures to let people people know how to respond to nuclear weapons. So the threat is there, but it doesn't need to be.
So then, Colonel Davis, you're saying that Kim Jong-un sees it as suicide if he were to strike first. You're also saying, so you're saying that he won't, it'll be more defense. You're also saying that the powers that be here in the military and the administration, they need to tamp down their talk of possible military action. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, because everybody knows, North Korea most pointedly understands that we have a 100-to-1 advantage on nuclear weapons. And as President Trump said in his tweet earlier, his button works. And we know that for sure. And North Korea doesn't know for sure if theirs is going to work, but ours will. And so all of that plays to our advantage. So we need to play to that, but we need to lower the temperature.
How do we do that? How do we lower the temperature?
Well, number one, we need to stop using incendiary comments and talk about how we're going to destroy people and all this. And we need to reinforce these talks that have begun. And we need to emphasize diplomacy and support Secretary Tillerson and in his efforts.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Colonel Davis, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Eric?
Well, today's false alarm are raising some stark questions about whether or not we are really completely prepared to deal with a real missile threat. So how concerned should we be, and what can we do about this? We'll have more of our continuing coverage here in the Fox News channel straight ahead. And we're continuing with our Fox News alert, the false missile alarm that sparked panic in Hawaii today, raising lots of concerns about how prepared that state and really the rest of the country may be for a real emergency of this type. Dr. Manny Alvarez is with us, senior managing editor for FoxNewsHealth.com. Dr. Manny, always good to see you, but man, oh man, you wake up in the morning, 8 o'clock, you got your cell phone, you take a look, first thing you see, ballistic missile headed your way.
Yeah, I know.
What do you do?
Well, listen, as a matter of fact, I spoke to a doctor this week who specializes in radiation survival here in New York. We did a segment for Fox News Health. Exactly, and my impression as a doctor was like, listen, the nuclear bomb is coming your way. Are you going to survive it? And I thought, no, but in the case, he explained to me, a couple of things happened, right? So the immediate area of impact, everything gets destroyed. That could be 1 or 2 miles. So there's no survival whatsoever there. Then once you go beyond 3 miles, 3.5 miles, there's a tremendous radiation exposure. And that is when shelter becomes very important. If you shelter yourself immediately within the 15 or 20 minutes and you're not outside, the fallout, which is the dust and radiation particles that are coming down very heavy like rain, you have a good chance of making it. Now, the shelter is important because if you have a simple basement and you have a wooden structure, that doesn't really keep a lot of radiation away, and you have to be very careful that the air from the outside doesn't go into the basement. The higher the building, the better the shelter. So it is important to think about sheltering, in big cities where you're going to go because you only have 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah, we've seen this in New York and other cities, as I mentioned earlier, with the they used to have the radiation sign in front of shelters.
So the bigger the building, and if you go inside and you stay away from that dust is very important. And of course, making sure that no air comes in. Typically, it takes about 24, 48 hours for you to be sequestered in those shelters and let that fallout dissipate before.
That's why they had food. They were stocked with food and water.
Right. Well, and that brings to the most practical things. You have to think about water, because if you think you're going to open the faucet and you're going to start drinking water from the faucet, that's not that simple, because that water is going to have radiation. The same thing about food. But you do have 48 hours that if you shelter yourself and you stay away from that fallout, you're going to minimize the radiation exposure.
So if you're in Hawaii or some other potentially vulnerable spot, let's take a look at the Hawaiian plan. Basically says from 0 to the first 10 minutes of launch, that's the launch. Then after 10 minutes or so, here's the plan that they give out to the people of that state. You got detection. You have warning sirens that start. They detect. You see the little signs there that you have to run, find shelter, and then stay tuned. Exactly what you were just saying now.
So, at least 48 hours you have to stay indoor. And again, that's when the help. Now, listen, radiation exposure is very important. And there are medications to treat radiation poisoning. And this is something that there's a lot of work being done.
Is there something to take to prevent it?
Nothing to prevent it. Once you have radiation poisoning, one of the things that happens when you get exposed to radiation, it kills all your white blood cells. cells, right? White blood cells are our inner army to fight infections. So immediately, if you get a lot of radiation, you don't have the capacity to fight infections. You know, all your bone marrow is destroyed. So now there are medications that try to build that, but in hospital settings. But you have to remember, it all depends where you are. It all depends in that first 3 miles, because that's the heavy-duty radiation. 90% of people are going to get radiated unless they have very, very secure bunkers.
You are sketching out a chilling, frightening...
It is. I mean, it is. You know, nuclear survival is an apocalyptic survival. You try to do your best. Once you are beyond 5 miles and 7 miles and 10 miles from a nuclear explosion, the survival goes very, very high, and you're able to evacuate those areas, even so, in a much better organized planning.
We haven't had to think about really in a concrete way for many, many years. Finally, the earlier guest talked about the CDC guidelines. You know anything about those? Talk about the radiated dogs that you've got to watch out for pets.
Well, listen, everything that you had, everything that stays outside, pets, cats, anything like that, those animals unfortunately become a source of radiation. And again, it's that dust. You don't want to bring, once you go into a shelter, lock down, nothing comes in here, not even the air from the outside. It doesn't matter if the pooch is outside and you want to let them in. That is a death sentence because you're bringing the radiation particles inside your shelter. So unfortunately, you hunker down, you hope for the best, hopefully you have some water, maybe some food, but if you could write it out 48 to 72 hours, maybe you got a chance. Maybe.
The apocalyptic vision that we haven't entertained for quite some time.
It is amazing.